Yeah, again, it's just weird. It's, speaking about this term punching left, right? So there's punching up and punching down in comedy. Punching up is what George Carlin does, what you do, right? Which is when you ridicule the people above.
With power.
And the people
right.
in power, right? That makes for better comedy. It makes for way more ethical, interesting comedy, but it's just funnier. And what we see now a lot is these liberals distinguishing themselves from the true left or the true progressives, whatever you want to call it. And they're really trying to, you just put your finger on it, which is that this whole narrative about the savior complex, right? They were trying to marginalize Sanders supporters and trying to make us look like lunatics or fringe because they knew that his support was really, there was a lot of enthusiasm, right? And there was an enthusiasm gap between him and Hillary. And so the way that they tried to deal with that was by making us look crazy.
Yes.
Instead of acknowledging the fact that this guy is someone who's really speaking to people. And what's most dangerous about him is that he was speaking to people from various political walks of life. This wasn't just about political party, political identification or affiliation. This was someone who was tapping into something that everyone was feeling and was able to reach people who otherwise wouldn't have cared about politics, which is exactly why the Democrats should have embraced him, the Democratic Party. But yeah, this was just mean-spirited. And again, I hope people aren't buying this idea that it's all white people. That's one of the most ironically racist things that has happened during this campaign is the total invisibilization and marginalization of people of color who support Sanders, who are there, who the media actively chooses to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, Katie, for instance, the person that Bernie wanted to have introduce him at the convention was Nina Turner, a black state senator from Ohio. So,
right.
And then, so we don't get to see. So again, it's just rich white people. That's that whole thing. And it's white privilege to not vote for Hillary Clinton. It's white So if you're not supporting the corporatist warmonger, it's because you're white and privileged. Wait a minute. All the white privileged people I know are supporting Hillary Clinton. What are you fucking talking about? The people I met on the streets of Philadelphia are much like the people you met, were poor people. People who have modest means, or they were either that, and they were Asian, they were Mexican, they were black. I talked to Tim Black. I talked to Core Element. Those are just two guys on stage with me at a protest in Philly. So this idea that somehow it's white privilege, no, it's people. If you have money, you want to vote for Hillary Clinton. It's the people who actually are struggling, who feel the effects of neoliberalism, who are rejecting Hillary Clinton. So it's the exact, of course, it's the exact opposite of what the establishment and the pretend left-wing media is pushing right now, that it's somehow your white privilege. It's only Bernie, bro, as if there aren't women supporting Bernie Sanders. Just the craziest thing. And of course, they get away with it because they have a bigger megaphone. Go ahead. What's that?
No, the women who support Sanders, that's because we want to be where the boys are, right? That's the narrative. So,
yes.
Or look at what Boxer said. Young people like him because he reminds them of his grandfather. Can you imagine if someone had said that about Hillary Clinton?
Or Barbara Boxer.
Well, yeah, I know. I was like, okay, Babs, thanks. It's incredible the difference that hair dye makes.
I actually was walking down the hall at the DNC. She was next. She was almost shoulder to shoulder with me. And
I'm shoulder to hip. Let's be honest. How tall are you?
Yeah.
How tall is she? I'm not being shortest. It's just a cute image to measure.
Yeah, I'm not the tallest guy in the world either. So I have sympathy for height challenged people.
You're not height challenged.
I'm 5'8".
She was like 10.
I'm 5'8". I'm on my tiptoes. So anyway,
remember that?
When she flipped, she said she was afraid for her life, and then the course pictures came out. She's flipping the people off as she gets off stage. Yeah, Barbara Boxer, of course. So of course, they're all full of shit. So when a real liberal comes along, they just shit all over them, and that's why you can't. It was, and so this is a perfect. I want to tell everybody to go read your article because I don't feel like we're doing it justice here. It is so good. In fact, Glenn Greenwald even noticed your article, and he had some interesting things to say about it. Let me just let me see if oh yeah, here it is.
This was I had to cut myself off at this number of examples because there's so many. This was just like a sampling. I could do this every day. I could blog every day until November. Maybe I should do that.
So let me show what Glenn had to say about it. So You say, here's your tweet. You say, the left, we're not treated like second-class citizens by any means, but seen as feral, strident, socially inept ideologues regardless, which is a perfect yes. And Glenn Greenwald, who read your article, responded to you, said it's because there has been no viable, threatening left-wing alternative to Democrats for a long time until this year. Yeah, before it was Ralph Nader. That was it. Right. That's all we had, and that was 16 years ago, and they're still shitting on him.
Yes, and it scares the shit out of them.
And misrepresenting how that happened also. That's another issue.
Say it again?
Well, they're misrepresenting what happened in 2000, right, with the election, with the number of Republicans who voted, the number of Democrats who voted for Bush.
Right.
They like to frame it about Nader as a spoiler as opposed to lots of other issues.
No.
Or how about Gore not fighting the recount, right?
First of all, Al Gore won the election. So now how you can blame that somehow on Ralph Nader is beyond me, because Al Gore actually won the election. We all know that now. So again, how that's somehow Ralph Nader's fault. And by the way, this is the first election, and I've mentioned this in other videos. Katie, can you remember another election, or can you remember reading about another election where the establishment blame the voters for being wrong and not the candidate for not attracting enough voters? This is even people go, well, Al Gore and Ralph Nader. No, people got mad at Nader. Nobody got mad at the voters. Nobody blames the voters for Nixon. Nobody said you should have voted for McGovern.
Totally. That's a really important point. That's a really important point. Yeah. Well, the thing is that I had this kind of coming out thing on Twitter. I mean, it's not to sound precious, but I went on this Twitter rant. Sometimes I'll go on these Twitter rants where I number them, and it's kind of embarrassing in retrospect. But basically, what I was doing, and this was what Glenn Greenwald was responding to, was I was kind of I was raised by a very left family, and during Bush and during Obama, I knew that I was far to the left of a lot of my friends. And we don't even have to call it left versus liberal. We can call it like establishment versus not establishment, or neoliberal versus progressive, whatever. But there has been this punching left. And I used to kind of dismiss it like, okay, when the revolution comes, we're going to have to choose sides. But until the revolution comes, I'm fine with working with people who are a little bit to my right. There's so much that we can agree on in terms of fighting and opposing. But this election really kind of exposed the differences between us. And one of them is that I kind of always thought in the back of my mind that even people who aren't as to the left as I am, I kind of thought that if a real viable progressive had come around, we'd all kind of rally around him, right? And I thought that, the reason that we hadn't supported a really someone way to the left of the Democrats was because there was no one around who could fill that role. Like Nader was not a galvanizing figure. He wasn't a very uniting, charismatic figure, right? So, but then what happens is you have Bernie Sanders, who is very viable, doing really well, and people still didn't support him. And it really kind of put into stark relief the difference between people who kind of talk the talk and actually want to see the world change. Like a lot of liberals that, again, they're just status quo, but they want better optics.
I couldn't agree with you more. This really has outed people like Jeremy Stahl at Slate. It's out. You know what it's done? It's outed like even Talking Points Membo. It's just weird to see these people who you thought couldn't be more lefty. They're not. They're actually corporate Democrats. Now Talking Point Member is just spending their time shitting on Jill Stein. The same slanders that they used against Bernie Sanders, they're now using against Jill Stein. And how you could try to slander Jill Stein while supporting the most corrupt Democratic nominee in the history of our country is beyond me. Jill Stein never voted for a war.
Right. You can have, this is the thing, like first of all, the anti-vax smear was so coordinated. I mean, I don't get why people don't at least stagger it. Like, if I were working for this media team that's clearly like getting talking points from the Clinton team and David Brock, I would be like, okay, I'm going to write this hit piece. Why don't you wait till Tuesday and have it slightly different? But no, they all come out at the same time. It's so obvious. They got the same memo. And the other thing that I love, so they're talking about Jill Stein being an anti-vaxxer. She hasn't said anything more vaccine doubting than Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama.
Correct.
And yeah, there's a really great article on Shatterproof that I'll email you, Jimmy, and you can tweet it out. That goes through this. But they're doing the exact same thing to Stein that they did to Sanders. And I think what they don't think anyone's going to notice, like John Aravosis the other day was tweeting about how bad Stein's running mate Baraka is and how mean he was about Bernie Sanders. I'm like, wait. you shat on Bernie Sanders professionally for months. Like, I'm very touched that you care now about Bernie Sanders' feelings, but this is so disingenuous. And this is the other question that I genuinely have. These people who are shitting on Stein and shitting on Sanders supporters, do they actually think that they're a threat at all, or is this just sadistic?
Is it just fun? Right. Are you just, so you don't think Jill Stein is a threat, but you just want to shit on her for kicks?
Right. Which, here's what I think is so amazing about this. And I want to write another article that focuses more on this aspect of it. It was kind of like a part 2 of this one, which is that the entire framing of this election by Hillary supporters is that, well, Hillary's great. That's one of their arguments. But their other one really is that Donald Trump is an unprecedented fascist or neo-fascist, right? Now, if I was trying to save the world from fascism, you know what I wouldn't waste my think pieces on? Pieces about people who are not a threat to the election.
Right.
Like, that's just some self-indulgent, which is what they always call Sanders and Sanders supporters, right? That's the self-indulgent thing to do. Don't you have a war to win? Don't you have civilization to save? Don't you need to, like, write about how horrible Trump is and how great Hillary Clinton is? Why are you wasting your words on Jill Stein and Bernie Sanders, one of whom isn't running and one of whom is a totally marginal candidate?
Exactly right. Oh, I know why. Because they're propping up the weakest candidate in fucking history.
Right. So they're just insecure about it. I just don't get it. It's weird.
Yeah.
And some people actually think that they're like, I put something about this on Facebook. I was like, okay, either Stein and Bernie are busters. Either they're a threat or they're statistically irrelevant, right? Let's say they're statistically irrelevant. Then you're just wasting your time. And not only you're being mean-spirited, but you're actually being irresponsible, because if this election is about democracy versus fascism, you should be focusing on preventing the fascists from winning, right? Not just being self-indulgent and getting your rocks off, like, politically and ideologically or whatever. Now, if they are a threat, let's say that there is something at stake, why on earth do you think that shaming people and calling them stupid and selfish and self-indulgent, you think that's going to prevent them from embracing the politics that they're now embracing or considering embracing? Like, if you tell me I'm an idiot for considering voting for Jill Stein or considering being Bernie or bust, you know what that'll make me do with, like, that much more enthusiasm? Vote for Jill Stein or be Bernie or bust.
That's what did it for me. My whole point is that people go, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Hillary Clinton and then hold her feet to the fire. Well, if you could be a worse negotiator, I'd like to see it, because that's the same negotiation people were upset with Barack Obama about for the last 7 years. Right. You don't negotiate like that. You have no leverage after she's president. Why don't you hold her feet to the fire before you vote for her? Why don't you hold her feet to the fire now, and so she comes to your position, and now you have something to hold her feet over?
Right. That's like if I were a hostage, if I had taken hostages, right? This is the equivalent of what people are doing, right? They're like, all right, I have some hostages that I have with me, and I have a gun to their head. I really want $1,000 in an airplane, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to release the hostages, okay? But once they're in safety and you have me surrounded, make sure I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. You better give me that airplane and $1 million. That's
a great analogy. Again, I will probably steal that.
Do it. Way more fun than I did, because I just. But that would be really funny. A video series that plays out exactly what this looks like in hostage negotiation.
I agree.